Look, I need to start by telling you the rawest and most painful truth that someone can admit at 67 years old. I achieved everything society told me to achieve, accumulated more money than I could spend in 3 lifetimes, collected diplomas and titles that fill an entire wall of my office. And yet, at this exact moment, as I write these words in the deafening solitude of my 15-bedroom mansion, I would give everything, absolutely everything, for a single night embraced by someone who truly loved me. Are you enjoying this story? Then consider supporting the channel by subscribing. Take a look. 94.8% of the people who watch these videos are still not subscribed to the channel. If you're part of that group, take the opportunity to subscribe now. It's free and you'll keep receiving amazing stories. And don't forget, at the end of the video, you'll find more stories like this one. My name doesn't matter. My fortune doesn't matter. What matters is that I spent 40 years of my life in a frantic race after a horizon that moved away every time I thought I was getting close. And when I finally reached the top of the mountain and looked around, I realized with a frozen horror that I climbed alone, and that there was no one to share the view with me. I was born into a lower middle-class family. My father was a factory worker at an auto parts plant, and my mother was a seamstress. I grew up watching my parents work themselves to exhaustion, to pay rent on a house that wasn't even ours, to put food on the table, to give me a school uniform that was often second-hand. I remember perfectly the day when I was about 8 years old and saw my mother crying in the kitchen because she didn't have enough money to buy meat that week. My father came home late from the factory, tired, his back aching, and when he saw my mother crying, he simply sat next to her and started crying too. That scene was engraved in my mind as if it were yesterday. That night, lying on my thin mattress in the room I shared with my 2 younger brothers, I made a silent promise to myself. I would never, ever go through that. I would be rich. I would have so much money that I would never need to worry about bills, about food, about anything. That promise became my religion. At school, while other boys played soccer during recess, I stayed studying. When teachers asked who wanted to stay after class for extra help, my hand was always the first to go up, even when I didn't need help. I simply wanted to study more, learn more, be one step ahead of everyone else. My classmates called me a nerd, a geek, boring, but I didn't care. In fact, I even liked it, because that confirmed to me that I was on the right path and they were wasting time. When I was 14, I got a full scholarship to an elite private school in the city, one of those places where the children of businessmen and politicians studied. It was there that the difference between me and the others became even clearer. My new classmates arrived in cars with drivers, wore brand-name clothes, went on international trips during vacations. I went by bus, wore the same pair of shoes for 2 years, and my vacations were spending more time studying at home. But you know what happened? I started to stand out academically in an absurd way. My grades were always the best. I won all the math and science Olympiads. Teachers praised me publicly. This fed something inside me, a validation I had never felt before. If I didn't have money, if I didn't have the right clothes, if I wasn't invited to my rich classmates' birthday parties, at least I had something they didn't have. I was smarter. I was more dedicated. I was going to be more successful. This narrative became my fuel. When I graduated from high school, I got another full scholarship, this time to one of the best universities in the country to study engineering. My parents cried with pride at graduation. My mother hugged me and said I had achieved what she always dreamed for me, a chance to have a better life. I promised her I wouldn't waste this opportunity, and I didn't waste it, or at least not in the way I understood wasting at the time. I entered university at 17, young, full of energy, with the whole world ahead of me. It was the beginning of the 70s, and there was an incredible cultural effervescence happening. My dorm mates listened to rock, went to student protests, stayed up late discussing philosophy and politics, dated, experimented with new things. I watched all of this from afar, as if I were an observer from another dimension, not because I was conservative or closed-minded, but simply because I had a mission, and nothing could divert me from it. I remember once, in my first year, a group of colleagues invited me to go to a concert by a famous band that was going to play in the city. It was on a Friday night and everyone was going. A girl from my course, Mariana, even asked specifically if I was going, with a shy smile that today I recognize as romantic interest, but at the time I was so focused on other things that I didn't even notice. I declined because I had to study for an exam that was only the following week. They went, had fun, came back telling incredible stories, and Mariana never spoke to me the same way again. The undergraduate years passed at a strange speed. They were at the same time eternal in the hours of study and fleeting when I look back now. I graduated with honors, obviously, was the class speaker, received awards and invitations to graduate programs at the best institutions. Meanwhile, I saw my colleagues form pairs. Some even got married right after graduation. There were parties, there were relationships, there was drama and joy, and all that intensity of youth. I saw all of this happen around me as if I were a ghost, physically present but absent in all other senses. Once, in my third year, I was invited to be best man at the wedding of a classmate who had become a close friend, or at least as close as I allowed anyone to get. I declined. I said I had an important academic symposium the same weekend. It was true, the symposium existed, but it wasn't mandatory. I could have gone to the wedding and missed the symposium. But for me at the time, that would be wasting an opportunity to do academic networking, to impress important professors, to build my career. The friend understood, or at least said he understood, but our friendship was never the same. In the following years, he gradually drifted away until we completely lost contact. When I graduated at 21, I had already been accepted into a master's program in engineering at a top-tier American university. That's when my parents came to visit me for the last time before I traveled. My mother was older, more tired. The seamstress work had taken its toll on her eyes and hands. My father had just retired from the factory, forced by back problems after decades of carrying weight. They looked at me with so much pride, so much hope. My mother held my face with her calloused hands and said, "My son, you made it. You're going to have the life I always dreamed for you. But don't forget to live too, okay? Don't forget to be happy, to find someone to love, to have a family." At the time, I kind of ignored her advice. I thought it was mother talk, that kind of unfounded worry. I was 21. I thought I had all the time in the world for those things. First, I would build my career, then I would think about the rest. The master's program was intense in a way I had never experienced before. I was competing with the best students from all over the world, people from developed countries who had access to resources I could only dream of. But I had something many of them didn't have, a desperate hunger to prove my worth. I studied 16, 18, sometimes 20 hours a day. I slept 4 or 5 hours, woke up, went to the lab, spent the whole day there, came back late at night to my small shared apartment, ate something quick, studied a bit more, slept, and started over. Weekends didn't exist for me. Holidays were just extra days to work without the distractions of classes. My roommates thought I was crazy. They went out, explored the city, went to parties, traveled. They tried to include me a few times at first, but after so many refusals, they stopped asking. I became that weird guy who was always working, always with his head buried in books or at the computer. There was an assistant professor in the department, Dr. Chen, who sometimes stayed working late like me. We started running into each other in the lab in the early morning hours, always deserted except for the two of us. She was a few years older than me, had already finished her doctorate and was starting her academic career. She was brilliant, dedicated, beautiful too, with a smile that lit up even that dull laboratory. We started talking, first about work, then about other things. She told me about growing up in China, about family pressure, about how she too had sacrificed a lot to get where she was. For the first time in my life, I felt a real connection with someone. It wasn't just physical attraction, although that was there too. It was a mutual understanding, a feeling that someone finally understood what drove me. For a few months, those nightly meetings in the lab were the highlight of my days. I caught myself thinking about her during the day, anxious for night to come so we could meet again. One night, after weeks of these meetings, working side by side, talking about everything and nothing, there was a moment. You know that moment when you feel something is going to happen. We were sitting very close. She had shown me something on her computer, and when she turned to look at me, our faces were inches apart. She looked at me in a way that left no doubt about what she was feeling. My heart raced. I felt a wave of heat rising through my body. My first reaction was to lean forward, and then something in my head clicked. I thought, if I start something with her now, it will be a distraction. It will take my time. It will complicate things. I have to finish my master's. I have to publish my papers. I have to secure a spot in a good doctoral program. In less than a second, all that romantic tension was suffocated by my ambition. I pulled away, made a lame joke about being tired, and changed the subject to something technical. I saw the disappointment in her eyes, that light going out. She understood the message. In the following weeks, she stopped working late. We saw each other in the department, exchanged polite greetings, but that connection had been cut at the root by me. I completed my master's in record time, with a thesis that was highly praised. I published 3 papers in important journals. I got exceptional letters of recommendation. I was accepted into an even more prestigious doctoral program at another American university, this time with a generous scholarship. At 23, I was at the top of the academic world in my field, and I was completely alone. I had no close friends. I had no one to share my achievements with except my parents, whom I called sporadically to give news. I had never kissed anyone. I had never had a relationship. But I told myself it was okay, that this was temporary, that when I finished my doctorate, when I got a good job, when I finally got there, then I would have time for those things. The doctorate lasted 5 years. 5 years that today blend in my memory into a single paste of incessant work, scientific discoveries, publications, conferences, and a loneliness that I had learned not to feel anymore, or at least to ignore. My routine was monastic. Wake up, work, eat when I remembered, work more, sleep the minimum necessary, repeat. I became a research-producing machine. My advisor loved it, saw me as his most promising student. Other professors asked me to collaborate on projects. I was the golden boy of the department. At 28, I defended my doctoral thesis with honors. The committee was impressed. I received postdoc offers from institutions around the world. I also started receiving offers from the private sector, tech companies that were willing to pay obscene sums for someone with my qualifications. That's when I made another crucial decision. I could have accepted one of the postdocs, continued in academic life, a calmer path perhaps with more time to develop other aspects of life, but the private sector offers were too tempting. One company in particular, a tech startup that was beginning to emerge in Silicon Valley, offered me a starting salary that was more than my father had earned in his entire working life. They offered stock options that could be worth millions if the company grew as everyone predicted. They offered the chance to work on the most innovative projects in the field. How could I refuse? I accepted immediately. I didn't even consider the other options. I moved to California, to a tiny apartment in San Francisco that cost a fortune in rent, but was what I could afford with the starting salary, and dove headfirst into startup culture. If I thought I had worked hard before, the corporate world showed me a new level of intensity. The culture of Silicon Valley startups in the 90s was brutal. Working 60, 70, 80 hours a week was not only normalized, but celebrated. We worked late at night, weekends, holidays. There were people who literally slept in the office. I fit perfectly into that environment because it was what I had always done anyway. The difference is that now I was being well paid for it. My salary was excellent, my stock options were appreciating, and I was being promoted quickly. In 2 years, I was already a manager of a team. In 3 more, director of engineering. At 33, I had become vice president of technology. My salary and stock options had made me a millionaire on paper, and personal life non-existent. I had some co-workers I occasionally went out with for a happy hour after work, but these interactions were superficial, more networking than true friendship. We talked about work, about the industry, about business. No one talked about feelings, about family, about real personal life. I lived alone in an apartment that was essentially a place to sleep because I spent all day at the office. It had no decoration, no personality. It was functional and dead. In the rare moments when I was there and wasn't working or sleeping, I felt a strange emptiness, a restlessness I couldn't name. But I quickly pushed those thoughts away by opening my laptop and getting back to work. There were a few pathetic attempts at romantic life over those years. Once, a colleague from the marketing department clearly showed interest. She was outgoing, funny, always made a point of stopping by my office to chat. She invited me to dinner a few times. I always made excuses, but eventually, kind of pressured by other colleagues who noticed what was happening and teased me, I accepted going out with her. It was disastrous. Not because she was bad or unpleasant, but because I simply didn't know how to do that. I didn't know how to talk about things that weren't work. I didn't know how to read social signals. When she tried to hold my hand during dinner, I got so uncomfortable that I practically jumped out of my chair. At the end of the night, when she leaned in to kiss me, I simply didn't reciprocate. I froze like a statue. She pulled away, embarrassed, and said maybe we were incompatible. We never went out again, and she eventually left the company. I went back to my normal routine, relieved not to have to deal with that again. At 35, the startup where I worked was sold to a giant tech company for billions of dollars. Overnight, my stock options were worth $8 million. $8 million. I, who had grown up watching my parents struggling to pay rent, suddenly had $8 million. It was surreal. I could have stopped working right there, could have taken a sabbatical year to travel, to explore the world, to finally live a little. But what did I do? I accepted an even higher position at the acquiring company, with an even more generous salary and more stock options. Why? Because work was all I knew. Because stopping work would mean having to confront the emptiness of my existence. Because I had built my entire identity around professional success and didn't know who I would be without it. The following years were a continuous progression of more work, more success, more money, and more loneliness. I bought a huge house in an expensive neighborhood, with 6 bedrooms that would never be used, a pool that was never touched, a garden that I paid gardeners to take care of because I was never there to enjoy it. The house was a status symbol, a way to prove to myself and to the world that I had made it, but coming back to that empty house every night was depressing. Eventually, I started working even later, just to avoid having to go back there. My parents came to visit me once, a few years after I had bought the house. They were old. My mother had serious arthritis problems. My father had had a small stroke and walked with difficulty. When they saw the house, they were impressed, but also visibly uncomfortable. It was too big, too empty. My mother, always direct, asked, "Son, why do you need all this if you live alone?" I didn't know how to answer. Later, on the last night before they went back, she tried again. "You work so much, have so much money, but where's the happiness? Where's the family? Don't you feel lonely?" I got irritated with the question, said I was happy, that my career fulfilled me, that I didn't need anything else. She just shook her head, sad, and didn't insist anymore. Are you enjoying this story? Then consider supporting the channel by subscribing. Take a look. 94.8% of the people who watch these videos are still not subscribed to the channel. If you're part of that group, take the opportunity to subscribe now. It's free and you'll keep receiving amazing stories. And don't forget, at the end of the video, you'll find more stories like this one. 2 years later, I received the news that my mother had passed away. Sudden heart attack while sleeping. I was in an important meeting when my brother called. I left the meeting, caught the first flight to Brazil, but arrived too late for the wake. During the funeral, I looked at my mother's coffin and felt nothing, or almost nothing. It was as if I had completely shut off the ability to feel deep emotions. My brothers were crying, my father was destroyed, but I was there, dry, cold, disconnected. People must have thought I was being strong, maintaining composure, but the truth is, I simply didn't know how to access those emotions anymore. I went back to California 3 days later for a series of meetings that couldn't wait. I didn't take bereavement leave. I didn't take time off. I just went back to work as if nothing had happened. The decade of my 40s was an accelerated continuation of the same trajectory. I jumped from company to company, always to higher and better paid positions. I did another MBA, this time at an elite school, not because I needed it, but because I thought it would add more credibility to my resume. I was invited to sit on company boards. I started giving talks at conferences, was interviewed by business magazines as an example of success. I invested my money wisely and saw my fortune grow exponentially. At 45, my net worth exceeded $30 million. I was, by any objective metric, extremely successful and extremely empty. I started having health problems. First it was high blood pressure, then stomach problems due to constant stress and poor diet. I developed chronic insomnia. Even when I had time to sleep, my mind wouldn't shut off. It kept spinning around work problems, decisions I had to make, strategies I needed to develop. I started taking sleeping pills. Also anxiety medication. My doctor, a straightforward guy in his 50s, looked at me during an appointment and said, "You know you're killing yourself, right? Your body can't handle this pace. You need to slow down. You need to find ways to relax, to disconnect from work." I listened, thanked him for the advice, left the appointment, and continued exactly the same way, because I didn't know how to be different. At 50, I started having panic attacks. The first one happened during an important presentation to investors. I was in the middle of my speech, something I had done hundreds of times, when suddenly my heart raced, my vision started to darken. I felt like I was going to faint. I managed to finish the presentation on autopilot, but as soon as I left the room, I collapsed. Someone called an ambulance. At the hospital, after a battery of tests, they told me it was a panic attack. I was prescribed more medication. I started therapy, finally. But I went to sessions as if it were just another professional obligation, something to check off the to-do list. I talked to the therapist about stress management, about relaxation techniques, but never really opened up about the existential emptiness I felt. It was as if I had built walls so high around my emotions that even I couldn't access them anymore. It was also in my 50s that I started to really notice, that I had lost something fundamental. I saw younger co-workers leaving early to go to their kids' soccer games. I saw my assistant taking time off to celebrate a wedding anniversary. I saw people in restaurants having dinner with family, laughing, talking, connected. And for the first time, I felt a pang of something that could be envy or regret, or perhaps just the late recognition of an irreparable loss. But even so, I didn't change anything. I was stuck in a pattern, in inertia, in an identity I had built over decades and didn't know how to dismantle. At 55, I decided to retire, not because I wanted to, but because my body was literally falling apart. I had developed serious heart problems, type 2 diabetes. My blood pressure was out of control despite medication. My doctors were clear. Either I stopped, or I would have a fatal heart attack soon. So I stopped. I announced my retirement, received tributes. They threw a farewell party where hundreds of people showed up, congratulated me, told stories about how I had impacted their careers. It was surreal to be there, surrounded by all those people, and realize that I didn't really know any of them, and none of them really knew me. We were all strangers, connected only by professional transactions. Retirement was hell. Suddenly, I had no more meetings, no more projects, no more deadlines, no more that constant adrenaline. I had free time. I had silence. I had to confront myself. In the first few months, I tried to fill the time with hobbies. I tried golf, but found it boring. I tried painting, but had no talent and no patience to develop it. I tried traveling, visited countries I always wanted to see, but discovered that traveling alone is profoundly lonely. I dined at 5-star restaurants alone, visited famous museums alone, saw spectacular landscapes alone, and everything seemed colorless, meaningless, joyless. I started drinking more, expensive scotch every night, sometimes starting in mid-afternoon just to have something to do, to numb the emptiness. I tried for the first time in my life seriously to have a relationship. I started using dating apps. It was pathetic. A man in his late 50s with no real experience trying to navigate the world of modern relationships. I went out with some women, usually also professionally successful, also alone. But it never worked. I didn't know how to be vulnerable, how to open up, how to really connect with someone. Sex, when it happened, was mechanical, awkward. I had spent decades building an emotional armor so strong that now I couldn't take it off even when I wanted to. After a few failed attempts, I gave up. It seemed like too much effort for something that clearly wasn't for me. At 60, my father passed away. Pancreatic cancer discovered too late. I went to Brazil for the funeral, stayed a few days with my brothers, who had their own families, their own lives. I saw how they had wives, children, grandchildren. Their houses were noisy, chaotic, full of life. My nephews and nieces ran everywhere. There was always someone arriving or leaving, always some celebration or drama or just life happening. And I was a stranger there, the rich uncle who showed up from time to time, who gave expensive gifts but didn't really know any of them. One night, my older brother and I were alone after dinner, drinking beer in his backyard. He asked me with the frankness that only brothers have, was it worth it? I pretended not to understand. Was what worth it? All this rushing around, all this dedication to work, all this money. Are you happy? I was silent for a long time. Finally, I said, I don't know what happiness is. He looked at me with genuine sadness and said, that's the saddest thing I've ever heard. The following years, from 60 onward, were a slow but relentless decline. My health continued to worsen, despite all the private doctors, all the expensive treatments, all the medical technology my money could buy. I had a small stroke at 62, which left my left hand a bit weak. My vision started to fail. I developed severe arthritis. Every morning I woke up in pain, and every night I went to sleep in pain, and with loneliness. Loneliness became a physical presence, a creature that lived with me in that huge mansion. I talked to myself sometimes just to hear a human voice. I hired a housekeeper to come every day, not so much because I needed it, but because I wanted to have someone in the house, some human presence, even if it was just professional. At 65, I had the moment of clarity that gives this whole story its title. It was my birthday. I woke up alone in my king-size bed, in a room that looked like a hotel. There was no one to wish me happy birthday. My brothers sent messages on WhatsApp. Some former co-workers sent generic emails, but there was no one there physically to share the day with me. I spent the day alone, like any other day. At dinner time, on impulse, I decided to do something special. I went to the most expensive restaurant in the city, made a reservation. When I arrived, the maitre d' took me to a table for two. I said it would just be me. He quickly removed the other chair. I sat there in a restaurant full of couples, families celebrating birthdays, friends laughing together, and ordered a $500 steak, a $1,000 bottle of wine. Delicious food, exceptional wine. And when I finished, sitting there alone with a bill of almost $2,000 in front of me, I looked around and felt a wave of despair so deep it almost drowned me. What was I doing? What was all this for? What was the purpose of having all this money if I had no one to share anything with? I paid the bill, went home, locked myself in my room, and for the first time in decades I cried. I cried for hours, cried until I had no more tears, cried for everything I had lost, for all the choices I had made, for all the relationships I never had, for the life I never lived. It was after that night that I started to take an honest inventory of my life. I looked at everything I had achieved. The money, obviously, tens of millions of dollars, investments that continued to generate passive income more than I could spend. Properties in 3 countries, luxury cars I rarely drove, designer clothes that no one saw, professional awards stored in boxes, diplomas in expensive frames. And then I looked at what I didn't have. I had never had a real romantic relationship. I had never experienced the intensity of being in love, of having someone in love with me. I had never kissed someone in the rain, never woken up embracing someone, never felt the security of having a partner by my side. I had never had children, never held a baby that was mine, never taught a child to walk or read, never watched a son grow up and become an adult. I had never had real friends, that kind of deep friendship where you can be vulnerable, where there is real trust, where you are part of each other's life, not out of obligation, but out of genuine choice. At 65, I was a virgin in all the ways that really mattered. Virgin of love, virgin of real connection, virgin of fully lived life. And what could I do with this discovery? Nothing, absolutely nothing. You can't go back in time. You can't redo choices. You can't recover lost decades. I tried. I swear I tried. I tried the dating apps again, but now I was a 65-year-old man with failing health, with no real relationship experience, trying to connect with women who, understandably, wanted someone with a minimum of healthy emotional baggage. I tried to make friends, I signed up for clubs, for interest groups, but how do you make real friends when you never learned how? How do you open up to people when you've spent your whole life closed off? It's like trying to learn a new language at 65 after never having spoken anything but your native tongue. Technically possible, but extremely difficult, and you'll never have the fluency, the naturalness of someone who learned early. My health continued to decline. At 66, I had another stroke, more serious this time. I spent 2 weeks in the hospital alone except for the polite visits from my brothers who had come from Brazil. When I was discharged, I was with a cane. My speech was slightly slurred. Half my face was slightly drooped. The doctors were clear. My quality of life would only get worse. It was a matter of time until I needed constant care. So I did what any rich and lonely person does in that situation. I started researching luxury nursing homes, because that's what was left for me. I had no family that could or would take care of me. I had no partner who would stay by my side. I only had money, so I used the money. I found a perfect place, one of those nursing homes that look more like resorts, where each resident has their own apartment, where there are private chefs, nurses available 24 hours, cultural activities, beautiful gardens. It costs a fortune, obviously more than $20,000 a month, but I can easily afford it. I visited the place, did the tour, saw the other residents, all rich, all alone, or with family members who visited them rarely. I saw my own face reflected in each of them, people who had worked their whole lives, who had accumulated resources, and who were now there, waiting for the end in material comfort, but emotional isolation. I signed the contract. I'm moving in a few months, so here I am at 67, writing this as a kind of testament, a warning, a scream in the dark. I did everything right according to the metrics that society imposes. I studied hard, I worked even harder, I climbed the corporate ladder. I accumulated wealth. I am the American dream realized. And I'm dead inside. I've been dead for decades, I just hadn't realized it. Because you can have all the money in the world and still be the poorest person if you have no one to share your life with. You can have all the diplomas, all the titles, all the professional recognition, and still be a complete failure if you never learn to love and be loved. I know what you must be thinking, that I'm being melodramatic, that a rich person complaining is pathetic, that there are people going through real problems while I cry in a mansion. And you're right, in a way. I recognize the absurdity of my situation, but here's the painful truth. Loneliness doesn't care how much money you have. Lack of purpose doesn't disappear because your bank account is full. Regret can't be bought or sold or eliminated with money. And death, when it comes, won't be any less lonely because it happens in an expensive room. If I could go back in time, what would I do differently? Everything. Absolutely everything. I would have said yes when that college girl invited me to the concert. I would have kissed Dr. Chen that night in the lab. I would have accepted being my friend's best man. I would have worked less and lived more. I would have risked my heart, even knowing that hearts can be broken, because a broken heart is still alive, still feeling, still connected to humanity. My heart was never broken because it was never used. It's here, whole but atrophied, like a muscle that was never exercised and is now too weak to function. I would have valued people above achievements. I would have understood that a dull night at a bar with friends is worth more than any promotion. That holding hands with someone you love while watching a bad movie is worth more than sitting alone in a first-class seat to Paris. That the mess of a house full of family is worth more than the sterile perfection of an empty mansion. I would have understood that life is not a solo career but a shared experience, and that no one at the end of life looks back and thinks, I wish I had worked more, or I wish I had made more money. People think about people, about moments, about connections, about love. But I didn't understand this in time, and now it's too late. Too late to build deep relationships, too late to have a family, too late to learn to be vulnerable, too late to really live. All I have left is plenty of time to reflect on all the missed opportunities, on all the doors I closed, on all the paths I didn't take, and plenty of money to pay people to take care of me while I waste away, people who are professional and kind, but who go home at the end of their shift and don't think about me anymore. Because I'm just another client, another job, another one of the rich and lonely old people they attend to. This is my legacy, not the millions of dollars I'll leave to some charity institution I randomly chose because I have no one to inherit. Not the patents I registered, or the products I helped develop, or the companies I helped build. My legacy is this warning: don't do what I did. Don't sacrifice life in the name of a career. Don't postpone relationships thinking there will always be time later. Don't work so much that you forget to live. Don't build walls around your heart thinking it protects you, because it actually only imprisons you. There's a quote I read once, I don't even remember who said it, that says no one on their deathbed wishes they had spent more time at the office. I can confirm it's true, but I can add something to that. It's also true that on your deathbed, when you're alone in a luxury hospital room being cared for by paid nurses, and not by children who love you, not by a partner who vowed to stay by your side in sickness and in health, you realize with brutal and painful clarity that you made all the wrong choices, and that realization doesn't bring wisdom, doesn't bring peace, doesn't bring anything but a regret so deep it physically hurts. So here's my advice, my testament, my last attempt to give some meaning to a wasted life. Balance. Please, balance. Work, yes. Study, yes. Build careers, yes. Make money, yes. But never, ever, make that the center of your existence. Prioritize people. Say yes when someone invites you out even when you have work. Leave the meeting early to watch your kids' game. Take time off to celebrate an anniversary. Make time to date, to marry, to have children if you want children. Cultivate real friendships. Be vulnerable. Risk your heart. Live. Really live. Are you enjoying this story? Then consider supporting the channel by subscribing. Take a look. 94.8% of the people who watch these videos are still not subscribed to the channel. If you're part of that group, take the opportunity to subscribe now. It's free and you'll keep receiving amazing stories. And don't forget, at the end of the video, you'll find more stories like this one. Because in the end, and the end comes faster than you imagine, what matters is not how many zeros you have in your bank account, or how many diplomas you have on the wall, or what your professional title was. What matters is whether you loved and were loved, whether you had people around you who truly cared about you, whether you created memories worth reliving, whether you lived a life worth living. And I, with all my millions, with all my successes, can't say I had any of that. And that's the truth I discovered at 65, that still shocks me today at 67, and that will haunt me in the few years I have left. I wasted the only life I had in the name of achievements that I now see as completely empty. Don't make the same mistake. Please don't make the same mistake. It's too late for me, but not for you.